This is about defending democracy. This is no longer Democrats versus Republicans. What do you want your kids to believe in? There must be give and take.
This is White Flag with Joe Walsh.
Joe Walsh here, governmentauction.com. It's a live auction site where you bid against other people interested in land, jewelry, coins, all kinds of collectibles, even Rolex watches. Have you ever wanted a 40-acre plot of land in Texas or Wyoming? Governmentauction.com has it. If you're the winning bidder, you don't need to go through credit checks. You just make a few down payments, keep your monthly payments going for a few years, and the land is yours. While you're making payments, you can use the land just like you would if you owned it. I know I've always wanted a big piece of land where I could go and just hang out, hunt, or hang with my dogs. And it's easy to sign up and start bidding on something that catches your eye. Go to governmentauction.com. It takes less than 5 minutes. Governmentauction.com. Hey, Joe Walsh, White Flag with Joe Walsh. Please subscribe to my YouTube channel. It doesn't cost you a damn thing. White Flag with Joe Walsh. Mike Madrid is my guest. I have so much respect for this guy. Co-founder of the Lincoln Project, longtime political consultant, nationally recognized expert on Latino voting trends. You need to follow him on Twitter if you'd like to be a little smarter about the nuts and bolts of politics, at Madrid_Mike. And we may touch upon this, my friend, at the end of the conversation. Excited for this book you've got coming out in the election year next year, The Latinization of America. Cannot wait for that. Mike, thank you for joining me. I wanted to get your kind of balls and strikes expertise on a few issues moving forward. I should know this though. Are you still a Republican?
Well, before I answer that tough question, let me say you did not mention tequila aficionado in the introduction, which is the main reason I thought I was here, Joe. But we'll set that aside for a second.
How long have you been? Well, now hold on a minute, mister. I know you've got some roots that I don't have. Yeah. I became a tequila drinker 7 years ago, doctor's orders. He said it was better for my gut. I used to be vodka. Have you always been a tequila drinker primarily, or?
I will be 52 later this month. We're in May here. Woo-hoo. And I started drinking tequila in my early 30s as a connoisseur and really trying to learn the different varietals. And it came at a time when I have a house in the Jalisco region down in Mexico, which is the wine growing. Tequila is a varietal. Yeah. Right. It's like it's not the spirit itself is mezcal. Yeah. So all tequilas are mezcals, but not all mezcals are tequila. And again, I know this has nothing to do with wine.
No, but man, Mike, I love this.
So I collect artisan bottles at the house down in Mexico, where a lot of tequila makers, the people who've been doing it for centuries, make them in batches of maybe 30 to 100 bottles at a time.
Wow.
So you get a real sense of the soil and the tequila makers, process, the family stories about it. There's haciendas all over the region that kind of, make and manufacture. So we'll do an episode of the show down there sometime.
Mike.
While we're enjoying. But no, I've been drinking a little bit, slowed down a little bit, but I love it. It's great.
I concur, and I want to learn more from you on that topic as we proceed.
After that really good dodge, I will say, yes, I am still a Republican.
I should have known that answer, but I didn't.
No, it's okay.
And that's not where I wanted to go. But and I mean this question respectfully. I left the party 3.5 years ago after my idiotic primary challenge against Trump. Why are you still a Republican?
It's a great question, Joe, and let me think aloud here just for the benefit of the audience, too. There's both practical reasons, and then there's some philosophical reasons, and then there's probably just some plain stubbornness. But let me say, as a political professional, right, the tactical value, there's just value in having a voice in the party saying, this is really bad stuff. And that's for media purposes. It's to hold up the mirror to people that know they're doing wrong and are still complicit in it. And it's not what I ever thought I would be spending my life doing when I became a Republican professional, but the moment calls for something like that. And I don't mind being the last person shutting off the lights, before we exit. If that's what I'm called to do, then that's what we're called to do.
That's cool.
Now, having said that, I've seen a lot of good intentioned people that I admire, like yourself, who've said, I'm out, and I completely respect that and understand it. In large part because even if, and this is not going to happen, but let's just say, everything came back to normal and it was like Reagan Bush 84 again, right? And it came back to conservatism as we knew it, which it's not.
Yeah.
The people that I've seen break my heart and disappoint me are not people that I would ever want to work in coalition with ever again. Like they've demonstrated who they are, and you're never going to convince me, fool me once kind of a thing. Yeah. That the party can get back to what it ever was. It is forever changed. Having said that, I don't think it wants to change, like you've said, and you're right. It's very happy going down the road that it's going down. Right. But if there was some sort of like flip back 180 degrees, it's those are not people that I want to work in coalition with. So it's a fair question as to why. And again, there's both the practical, the philosophical is. I still believe what I've always believed about the role of the individual and government and the efficacy of government. I'm a Jack Kemp Republican. Yeah. And Jack Kemp believed that, conservatism was a way to lift all boats. It was to help people out. I believe we are our brother's keeper. That's a little bit different than a lot of conservatism. I think that using smaller, more efficient, more effective government and conservative, as we knew it, policies actually can help people, and that's important to me. That's a caucus. I'm a caucus of one now. I understand that in the Republican Party.
It's fascinating, Michael. You could be one of the few to turn out the lights when you eventually have to turn out the lights. Do you? And you've been a political professional almost your entire adult life. Yeah. Again, this is not where I wanted to go, but I'll ask you this before I then get to my topic. Mm-hmm. We are in a two-party country. We've always been in a two-party country. The notion, Mike, when you look at the numbers of a third party, a viable third party, a new party, all the people running as independents, is there anything to all of that? Or is it basically going to be Dem and Republican for the rest of our foreseeable future?
It's a great question, and the answer is the signs of a broader, what I call a de-alignment, has been happening for some time now. And my area of expertise is with Latino voters, and every indicator is in the Latino community, which is the fastest growing segment of the electorate, is that it is de-aligning faster than any other group. So I'm a very big believer that we probably in many ways would already have a multi-party system if it wasn't so cemented and baked into the structure of our governance. And to unravel that isn't like, it wouldn't take just an act of Congress, which would be very difficult anyway. Right. It would take the action of 50 different state legislatures and 50 different motivations to get that done in very unique ways. I don't want to say it's impossible, but it's as close to as impossible as you get. Yeah. And so the logical process of a de-alignment requires us to get to a place where things just become completely bogged down into these World War I trenches, and we're doing nothing but throwing mustard gas at one another, and nobody's making any progress. Right. That's essentially where we've been for the past decade, and it's going to get worse before it gets better.
It's going to get worse. Yeah. So here's where I want to go, and this led us into where I want to go. I agree with you that my former party, your current party, is not going to change. It's on the track it's on. Mm-hmm. I believe it's shrinking and dying as a national party. Mm-hmm. I think it's becoming a strong regional rural party. Yeah, right. But Mike Madrid, and this is up your expertise, I have an enormous fear because I think this is the path the party's on. Part of me wants to say bon voyage, Republican Party. But I worry, Mike Madrid, that the thing that could keep the Republican Party alive and doing pretty well is a Democratic Party that seems to be utterly out of touch with working class Black and especially Latino voters. And
Right.
my fear, Mike, is that Democrats are going to do so poorly with these folks that it's going to kind of prop up and maybe even rescue the Republican Party. Take that as a big topic and drill down on it.
Well, I'm glad you did, because this is basically the book that I'm writing.
Yay!
Yeah. So Joe, I mean, look, you've characterized it, I think, perfectly. And let me set the stage here a little bit more by saying, in this extraordinarily highly partisanized environment, when we are a nation that is no longer comprised of undecideds, you know, when Reagan and Carter were running in 1980, a campaign you and I probably remember.
Yep.
You know, a month before the election, when Reagan accepts the nomination, it was only 30 days before, 30% of Americans were undecided. Like 30% didn't know which way they were going to go. Okay. Today, you're lucky if there's 3% undecided. And that has been characteristic of the American political system for this entire century. I can say that now. We're 24 years deep into it now. We're a quarter of the way done with this new century that we were always looking forward to. So I say that because there's such little movement that is happening in the electorate, and the range of the victors and the losers between Republicans and Democrats are extraordinarily small. There are only two truly discernible voter groups that are moving. The first is college-educated white women have been moving away from the Republican Party, largely because of the crazy that you and I talk about all the time. It's largely cultural. They're still holding on to this idea that there's this kind of conservative economic policy, which of course hasn't been there for a while. But what's really driving them away is the abortion, the gay marriage, the protecting the ancient Confederacy. Those type of things are like, I can't tell my friends I'm a Republican anymore. It's just become a cultural problem. But the other group that is shifting is U.S.-born Hispanic males, and they're moving to the right. And the reason why is because they're behaving very much like their non-Hispanic white male counterparts. These are blue-collar workers. You know this far better than I do. I love hearing you talk about it because you're articulating it to people. The average blue-collar person, we used to call them Reagan Democrats in the 80s.
Yeah.
We don't now because there's no virtue in reaching across party lines, so nobody wants to admit they're talking to Democrats. But this is a blue-collar, faith-based, didn't go to college, making it paycheck to paycheck, but playing by the rules, people who see a Democratic Party that's just out of touch and unrelatable. It's not even anti-Democratic Party as much as it's, I don't even know what you're saying anymore.
Mike, are we talking about Hispanic males, or are we talking about females as well, or is it male driven?
It's a great question. It's a really good question. We're talking about Hispanic males largely.
Okay.
In fact, the gender gap amongst Hispanics is far bigger than it is with any other racial or ethnic group. Really fascinating. So this Latinization of America that I'm talking about that's going to happen over the next 10, 20, 30 years is also going to be much more female dominated. But there's also a lot of reasons why that's happening. I don't want to bore you or go too deep under the hood here, but Hispanic women have a much greater likelihood of going to college than men do. Yeah. And the education gap is one of the key indicators of partisanship in American politics today. So it's not exclusively men, but it's largely men that are moving to the right, this rightward shift that we're talking about. And it's measurable, it's discernible, and because the vast majority of new Hispanic voters are U.S.-born, English-dominant or English-exclusive, non-college educated workers, they are behaving like the proverbial, white blue-collar worker that you know better than anybody in the country. And that's what's happening.
So what pisses them off about the Democrats? Is it the same thing that pisses off white?
Yeah. These are people that are working on the same construction sites, the same energy patches, the same manufacturing industries. They're working in the same areas. They view the party very much as a threat to their industries. Mm-hmm. And they also view them as kind of disrespectful to their culture. It's like I was saying, it's not atypical. It's very similar to their white counterparts, and they socialize with these folks. Interracial marriage rates, by the way, with Hispanics are over 50%. So it's
Oh,
more
wow.
likely you will marry a non-Hispanic than a Hispanic. So their kids are marrying, right? It's like
Wow.
there's a close familial integration, assimilation is what we used to call it. And that's what's happening. And so there's this kind of shock, like how can it be happening that Hispanics are moving to the right? And the answer really is it's Hispanics are following a very typical assimilative political trajectory as Greeks, Jews, Poles did at the turn of the last century. And it's different. It's unique because the sheer size and scope of it is changing the notions of the melting pot. But it's still happening, and the party that figures out which way to go with this ethnic demographic is going to be the party of dominant part of the next generation.
Is it, Mike, is it more cultural or economic?
That's the $1 million question, and I can't say it's either. I'm going to say it's both. But boy, Joe, that's the question, right? I will say this: in most instances, I would argue and have in my career that it's a class issue.
Yeah.
You speak to people by economic class. That's why people come to America. It's for economic opportunity. They're not coming to be woke. They're not coming to be called Latinx. They're not coming for racial equality. They're coming to pay the rent and feed their kids and give their chance at the American dream. And that sustains. That happens when recent immigrants come and they send their kids hopefully to college in that second, third generation. And by the third generation, there's a real loose affinity to the mother country. They don't speak Spanish. Nobody's waving the Mexican flag. Nobody's feeling oppressed because they're Latino. But there are those cultural sensitivities that can be piqued, that can be picked at, that can be tapped into. And it's why Hispanics as a group tend to be somewhat more sensitive on immigration issues.
Yeah.
Although by the third generation, look where most of this shift to the right is happening. A lot of it's happening in border communities because people are like, this shit's out of control. Like, it's not a Hispanic thing. It's a chaos thing. Fix it.
So, Mike, you say whichever party is going to realize this first and listen to it and deal with it is going to have success. Mm-hmm. Am I wrong in saying that this stupid, Trumpy Republican Party has already done that?
That's a great question.
They're doing it?
Let me say this. The party that is able to capture the hearts and minds of an aspirational, multi-ethnic working class
I like that.
Is going to be the dominant party for the next generation. The Democrats have a problem with the working class piece.
Right.
The Republicans have a problem with the multi-ethnic piece. Okay.
Mike, that's a great way to put it.
Yeah. And so they're both struggling with that, right? It's like, and they even when they kind of get it, the orthodoxy of their own parties won't allow them to make those adjustments. And so you've got this wide swath of people coming up saying, well, I like a little of this and I like a little of that, but I really am de-aligning from both parties. And that's the real dilemma. Now, there's a big question in the modern Republican Party, right? This rightward shift happens and a lot of Republicans are saying, see, we're not racist. See, we're not anti-Mexican. Mexicans love us. Latinos love us. I would argue, as somebody who worked for George W. Bush when we were setting this standard, and became a Republican in the Reagan era, who was the last president to do immigration reform under the Immigration Reform and Control Act in '86, the most pro-Latino, pro-immigrant Republicans surpassed Trump's numbers. They did the best.
Yeah.
So I would also argue that the reason why Trump popped up to 37% wasn't because of his policies. It was despite his policies. It's not that they love the Republicans. It's just that they can't tolerate the Democrats anymore.
Oh, man,
and that's a
Preach.
huge distinction.
Mike, the cool thing about this podcast, because I'm so fucking homeless and the right now thinks I'm a traitor and the left doesn't totally trust me, I get everybody across the spectrum who listens to this podcast.
Yeah.
What you just said is brilliant. I don't think that. Does the Democratic Party understand this?
No. I mean, I have conversations with people on both sides of the aisle, but no, they don't, because they're as rigidly in their own orthodoxy as the Republicans, and that's what the book is going to be about. Is because I've been very unique in this world as you have. I was involved with Latino efforts with George W. Bush's campaign. Yeah. I ran a Democrat, Antonio Villaraigosa's campaign for governor against Gavin Newsom in California. I did the Lincoln Project. Like I've seen all sides and the middle of this at the highest levels of both parties. And what I will tell you quantifiably is, no, the Democrats don't get it any better than the Republicans do. The Republicans are just not, they're just worse in the minds of Latinos at the moment. But when you're starting to get to 60-40 numbers, parity is kind of getting there, right? And as the Hispanic vote, the Latino vote becomes more U.S. born, more politically assimilated, the math says that trajectory is going to start balancing out even more. So you could get to parity before it slides back. Either can happen, like I said, whichever party can figure out their working class problem as Democrats or their multi-ethnic problem as Republicans is going to be the ultimate victor. But in the interim, no, neither is doing it right.
Is the trend line, Mike, moving toward Republicans with this cohort?
Yeah, quantifiably. The high watermark was 2012 with Barack Obama at 75. He was getting 75-25. That's a true voting block, okay? Yeah. Hillary Clinton loses 6-7 points. She gets in the mid-high 60s in 2016. We didn't hear a whole lot about that, which was a very significant drop, by the way. Yeah. Because everything else was coming out screwy in the world in 2016. There was a million other reasons we were freaked out about. But then Biden drops to 59%, okay? Oof. So a lot of people, and in 2022, by the way, those numbers held consistent.
They did.
In an otherwise good Democratic year, Latinos voted the same way at the same percentage for Republicans as they did in 2020. So, yeah, look, any one data point is really kind of worthless. 2, it could be a coincidence. 3 is a trend line. You start getting to 4, and you've got an arrow pointing in a certain direction. You got to pay attention to.
Mike, outside of then Latino men, Hispanic men, working class men, do you sense, do you know, do you see the same sort of movement, even if it's not as great, among black working class men?
Another great question, Joe. The short answer is yes, but not to the same degree. Okay. We have, and the New York Times actually did a really interesting analysis in every immigrant precinct. Listen to this, listeners. Every immigrant-dense precinct in the entire country demonstrated a rightward shift in 2020.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a working class. It's a working class.
Yeah, but
problem.
I know, but Mike, when you say something like that, it's it's stunning.
It's stunning. It's stunning that we're not talking about it more, and that Democrats aren't freaking out about it more. But you have to remember, in the same way that the Republicans, and you and I are very aware of this, are becoming monolithically focused on their own demographic cul-de-sac and keep speaking to each other more intensely, even though it's getting smaller, it's getting more intense.
Yeah,
it's not dissimilar to what's happening in the Democratic Party, where there's a consolidation of white, college-educated, progressive voters, and they keep talking to themselves and convince themselves that these are the votes. The problem is you do start to leave the fastest-growing segment of the electorate outside of those two bubbles, who are voting not for parties, they're voting against whichever party they're viewing as the most out of touch. And voting, we have to remember something. This concept of negative partisanship explains so much about the American political system today. Most voters are motivated by what they're voting against, not motivated by what they're voting for.
Right.
So when people are like, how can Republicans vote for something that the party has no philosophy? It doesn't even have a platform anymore. It's kind of whatever Trump wants. Yeah, what Trump wants is against them, whoever they are. He tells them who to vote against, not what to vote for.
Yeah.
And that is such a primary biological driver in political behavior. And Democrats aren't that much different. You hear it all the time. Joe Biden's a little bit old and he's probably not too competent. He's not my first choice, but he's better than Trump. Okay, fair. I agree with that, by the way. But what I will also say is that's not an aspirational pull to the polls. It's you're voting against Donald Trump. You're not voting for the current incumbent. And that's been enough, by the way, for Democrats, and it probably will be. But let's disabuse ourselves of the notion that that's building a healthy party, because it's not. It's just protecting itself and the Republic from the excess, the violence, the extremes of the Republicans at the moment.
But if you and I right now bet on a $500 bottle of good tequila somewhere on whether that trend line, say it's Biden-Trump in 24, will Trump do even better in 24 than he did in 20 with the Latino vote?
That's a good question.
Against Biden. Assume against Biden.
I think he will do probably marginally better.
Marginally better.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, he did 37% was the last one. I don't think he gets into the, 45 range. He might. But is it inconceivable to see him at 42, 43? Very possible. Is it possible to see him slip down to 32, 35? Very possible. But the trajectory, and again, understanding the composition of the Latino electorate is very different than it was 20 years ago. 20 years ago, the fastest growing segment of the Latino vote was a recently naturalized Spanish-speaking first-generation immigrant voter.
Yeah.
That's still the narrative, okay? The immigration issue has never polled in the top 5 issues for Latinos. What does is the economy and jobs, by the way. Now, today, the fastest growing segment of the Latino electorate is a U.S.-born, English-dominant speaker who doesn't have that same familial ethnic tie or experience that their parents and grandparents did.
That's fascinating.
Yeah.
It makes sense, but that's fascinating.
Yeah, it's kind of common sense. And when you start to hear the numbers and the data, it's like, oh yeah, well, of course that makes sense. But that's what's happening. It's changing, right? It's getting bigger and it's expanding. There are still states like Tennessee and Montana where the group that's growing the fastest are Spanish speakers. And people start seeing Joe's Hardware turns into La Fiesta Taqueria, right? And they're kind of like going, wait a second, not in my America. We speak English here, right?
Yeah. But
when you start to look at other states like the Texases, the Floridas, the Californias, the Arizonas, the Nevadas, it's Mike Madrid's. They're English speaking, increasingly college educated, not fast enough, but increasingly homeowners, business owners, second, third generation, and they take on those political. They start to mirror the overall politics of the country.
Mike, I'm and 10 years ago, if you and I are having a conversation, crazy Tea Party Joe Walsh, it might have been a different conversation. We still would have drank tequila and loved each other. Yeah. I've always been a border hawk. When it comes to illegal immigration, be firm. But I've always been, when it comes to legal, man, let's bring gazillions in, open up.
Yeah.
That's not where the Republican Party is. And Mike, over the years, I've had so many Republicans tell me privately that they think they're fucked, that the reason they don't want to increase legal immigration because they think it's going to kill them at the ballot box. And so that's the primary reason Republicans don't want them here.
Yeah.
Is that, I know that's still the stance of this party, is to limit legal immigration, but maybe that's not as big a problem for them.
So let me say a few things about this, Joe, because I wish we would have known each other, because I think we would have been good friends, and I'm certain of it. But there's been no more striking contrast or more salient way to discuss immigration than to say legal versus illegal, because there's no gray area there, and it's been extraordinarily effective for Republicans. I've used it myself for 2 decades. Okay, and by the way, a much broader swath of the Hispanic Latino electorate wants stronger border enforcement than the Democrats are willing to acknowledge. Like much, much more, not a little, a lot more. Okay. Yeah. And any immigration reform that we ever gets done is going to have to start, and it should start, with increased border security. Now, you can't and shouldn't do it alone, because Republicans won't do anything beyond that, which is why it's called comprehensive immigration reform. You have to do the whole damn thing, because immigration reform only happens once a generation for a reason. It's really hard to do because you're redefining who you literally are as Americans.
Yeah.
Okay, first and foremost. So the second part to that is this idea of legal versus illegal. The economics strongly suggest that there's no way we are going to be able to pay for baby boomers especially, and the medical care and the retirement needs and Social Security to keep them intact, unless we've got cheap labor coming in to make that lifestyle possible.
Bingo.
And one of the great ironies is the same demographic that's watching Fox News and frightened by the caravans coming in are the people that need those folks to pay for their retirement. Okay, that's just the way it's going to work. It's just math.
Exactly.
And so we for a whole lot of reasons, America and the idea of America needs immigration. You
Yes.
need that work ethic. You need people coming in with nothing to create national character and fight and scratch and eke out a living to give their kids a couple of nickels to rub together to go to the next level. That builds character. It builds the American character. It builds work ethic. And I don't even want to say we've always been okay with that if they weren't brown, because we weren't. The Irish suffered through it. The Poles suffered through it. The Greeks suffered through it. Everybody suffered through it, okay? And that's part of the American experience too. So I don't want to overwhelm people, but what I will say is the sheer size and scope of what is happening is why people feel threatened. And the idea of making America great again, going back to this kind of as if America worked for everybody, which it obviously didn't, is a comforting notion to people that are seeing their local hardware store turn into a Mexican blaring music, place and going, what the hell is this? This is not my country anymore.
Yeah.
And I understand that as a political practitioner. I understand that as a Latino kid who grew up in Southern California and saw California changed. It breaks my heart as somebody who has fallen in love with the idea of the American experiment and truly believing that everybody can come here and create a pluralistic society where all men, all are endowed by their creator with certain inalienable rights.
Amen.
And what we're finding is when that's being tested, a lot of us don't really believe that.
No,
and we probably never have, brother.
Mike, you're so right. And look, I woke up to a lot of this, and I played around in that game and the whole right-wing media world, and I did more of that than I'm proud of. And a big part of it is because I've spoken to too many of these good, decent people, Fox's audience, and they do want like 1954 back, and for a lot of reasons, but part of it is America was a more white country. Mm-hmm. And there's been this fear among Republicans that they're facing a demographic disaster as America becomes less white.
Yeah.
What's so intriguing about what you're saying, Mike, is, and forget all of the bigotry involved in that, but forget about that, but just numbers-wise, maybe that's not abjectly true. If Democrats can't reach working class black and brown voters, my fear is Republicans might stumble into reaching them, even with all of their bigotry and everything else.
That's a great way to put it. It's why I said they're winning the votes despite themselves, not because of their best efforts, right? They're stumbling into it. Look, let's look at the numbers. First of all, let's say Trump built a wall and no immigrants were allowed to come in anymore. Let's say we built a moat with alligators and lit it on fire and had machine guns and nobody else was allowed to come in. By 2040, we would still be a non-white majority country.
Bingo.
The change is not happening with immigration anymore. The change has already happened. It's already happened. People are going to be having kids and grandkids. It's too late. It's already done. And too late for what then becomes the question. What does that mean? Well, we know Hispanics are more religiously affiliated than other groups. We know that their work ethic and their workforce involvement is higher than any other groups. We know that they take government assistance at much lower levels than any other racial or ethnic group. We know that they stay married longer than other groups do. What are you worried about? Like, this is really the reinstallation of the party that the Republican Party claims to be. And so it's really important, I think, to kind of understand.
So then what is it, Mike? Why doesn't your party, my former party, get that? Or do they get that? What you just said right there.
There's nothing that overrides the fear of a changing complexion in this country, brother. That's what it all comes down to. It's really fascinating. And here's the one thing I've been studying this for 30 years. The one thing I never, ever anticipated was that white voters, and we're going to start, this is what's really cool. I think it's cool. It's just a political observer. It's a little bit dangerous and chaotic, but we're going to start saying things in the next few years like white voters are not monolithic.
Yeah.
You have to, whites are starting to behave like minority voters, like an aggrieved racial minority, right? This is what they used to accuse blacks of doing forever. It's like, it's America. Pick yourself up by your own bootstraps. It's not a big problem. Like, what's the big deal? Now, when it's them, they're kind of like going, wait a second. Like, we're being replaced. Great replacement theory, right? They're trying to, let's lock down history in the books to say that this is what America is. Like, they're trying to do things while offensive, are also impossible. You can't stop change.
Yeah.
And that change is happening. And one of the great things that I lament is rather than using conservatism and constitutionalism and Americanism as a way to teach and give that gift to this next generation of Americans, it really is about blood and soil. It really is. I never understood how strong a driver biology is, and it is, unfortunately, bigger than our ideas as people. And that's anti-Americanism at its core. America, if we say things like America is an idea, it really is. The question that we're really going to be grappling with for the first time in our 250-year existence as we become a non-white majority country is, are ideas bigger and stronger than biology? We've always been saying no, but when faced with it, man, the jury's out, right? The jury's been deliberating for a long time, and there's no sign that they're coming to any conclusion on this.
That's fascinating, Mike. That really is fascinating. I've had way too many, thousands and thousands and thousands of white working class men and women over the last 6 years tell me a variation of the following. And these are people who don't feel affiliated with either party, but they all might kind of tell me Republicans are assholes, they're jerks, but Democrats are elite snobs who don't understand me. Yeah. I hear a variation of that with white working class America. Mm-hmm. I've got to believe that's similar with who you're talking about.
Yes, that's exactly what I'm saying. And it's also when they say things like coastal elites or snobbery or whatever, it's as much unrelatability as it is antipathy. It's like they live in a world I don't even understand. Like with the whole term Latinx, I wrote a piece for the New York Times.
Oh my God, yeah.
What I wrote is this piece saying basically they're now literally speaking another language. Like literally, it's not a metaphorically speaking another language. Like they're literally creating another language to show how far removed they are from where real working class people are at. And that's a political problem. That it makes it impossible to talk to and communicate to people when you literally have no ability to relate to them.
So what do they do? If you were advising the wise, smart men and women of the Democratic Party, what the hell do they do to address this problem head on?
Well, let me explain a little bit more about the problem before I get to the solution.
Okay.
First of all, the Democratic Party thinks it's the working man's party. They still believe that. They still believe they're the party of FDR. But most of these people have never gone into and talked to people who wear hard hats and are like, the Democrats are trying to put us out of work. Like the Sierra Club is the number one enemy of most of these industries.
And by the way, you're making clear right now, Mike Madrid, you no longer believe that's the case.
That what is?
That the Democratic Party is the party of the working class.
No, it's not. I don't. I mean, for the moment, they're still winning a significant share of that vote, but it's hemorrhaging. Like it's moving away very quickly, and it's realigning. That's that class education divide is the single largest realignment that is happening. So no, I don't believe that the Democratic Party is the party. My parents were all Democrats. We were working class, lower working class Mexican, people in Southern California. There was a rationale then, right? They were working class people. Today, it is. I didn't leave the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party left me, right? That working class people are saying that. Like, this is not my party. Like, I don't know what this is anymore. I don't know what you're talking about. I don't know about the cultural issues you're talking about. But more importantly, the economic policies that you're pursuing are literally designed to put me out of work. And the Democrat solution is always, well, build back better. Like, let's just do a bigger government program with more government spending to build infrastructure, and that'll create hard hat jobs. Look, I was working class. Okay, my family, I would say we were paycheck to paycheck, but we didn't make it paycheck to paycheck. Yeah. You had to find ways to get through the last week before the paycheck came in. There was not one of us that ever believed a politician was saying, "Oh, this spending bill is going to create jobs for you in 3 to 5 years." Like that is meaningless talk. Yeah. I'm not no, the policy set aside. The politics, they're meaningless. Because that same person is trying to get a job down at the manufacturing plant, and they're being put out of work or laying people off because they're not meeting up with these regulations or environmental policies or whatever it is that are putting these folks out of work. So my point of saying that is this. The Democratic Party has to really genuinely do some self-examination and say, if you're going to prioritize issues like environmentalism, as it should, and global warming, as it should, and the planet ending in 10, 15 years, whatever it is going to be, it can't be the way that you've done it for the past 20 years where it's just government-run programs and government-directed regulatory schemes to find our way out. You're going to have to invest in industries that hire working-class people in real meaningful ways to get them as part of this new economy that you're trying to build.
Yeah.
You have to. And the perfect example of what happened in California after we shut down the bases after the end of the Cold War in the 1990s is white working class folks left once we shut down the aerospace industry.
Yeah.
And people started moving to Colorado and Arizona and New Mexico and Nevada and Texas. We were exporting Republicans, literally.
Yeah.
They were replaced by Mexican immigrants who were working in the service economy, janitors, hotel cleaners, gardeners. That you can't live in California. Hell, you can't live anywhere with those jobs. That's what we're creating is this economy where we are pushing industries out, right? We're not creating the incentives for private industry to come in and build economies that can provide a living, sustainable wage for people. Now, part of that's globalization. I get that, but a lot of it has to do with domestic policy decisions that are being made. And saying I'm pro-union just doesn't fly anymore, man. Like saying I'm pro-union, God bless you. If you know, that's like using last century's solutions for this century's problems.
Yeah,
it doesn't work.
And Mike, the notion of class warfare.
Yeah,
you're more. You can probably quantify this. I've always thought the beauty of this country is, especially with new immigrants who come here. They don't want to necessarily take from the rich and always attack the rich because they want to be rich one day. That's why they came here.
Yeah.
And Democrats have always played the class warfare game. I wouldn't imagine it would work as well with these folks.
It does not. In fact, let me say this. This is really interesting too. Negativity generally doesn't work as well. Now, a lot of that is a function of age.
Yeah.
Because if you look at like polling, it's like Latinos are poorer, they're less college educated, they're more likely to be renters, they're working in jobs where they can't afford it, and they're overwhelmingly optimistic about the direction of the country. It's like, how do you have all that, right? It's part of it's age. It's just like, things aren't good, but one, they're better than where I came from, and two, I've got the opportunity and the time frame to build a life. Like that's America, man. If you look at the polling, of the average Latino and took out the crosstabs, it would look like a Republican in the 1980s. It's what it is, man. It's this future aspirational, upwardly mobile, people ready to scrap and work extra jobs and save and send my kids to college and look out for the community and go to church on Sunday and play by the rules. And we'll pick up another job. We're not looking for anything from the government, right? But because they're not white, the Republicans are like, they're invaders. Right?
Oh my God, Mike. So actually, when you flip it then, the Democrats are really, really fortunate that the Republicans are so batshit crazy and focused on the bigotry in the race. Otherwise,
you should be writing the book for me. I'm too verbose about all this.
Oh my God, Mike, I love
that.
This.
That is exactly what it is. It's not, there's no, the partisan anchors amongst Latinos are very flimsy, very weak, very tepid. And it's why when they start to move, like they're shocked, like white progressives are like, you're not white. What else can we bestow upon you on your ladder of oppression to bring you back? And Latinos are like, what are you talking about, man? Like, that's not the way we see the world. We're just looking to make a living, man, and just trying to hustle. Give me another hustle and I'll do it, and we'll keep building up. And
I love that. I love that, Mike. I don't think the Republican Party can change only in that their base is the middle-aged older white folk and they need to speak to them. But I would think the Democratic Party can change to reach these folks more easily.
It's not going to be easy, but what it will require is Latino politicians to start defining an agenda that way. And that has been remiss because, and this is really fascinating, Latino politicians have their pathway to success is to play the race and oppression card. Rather than push for and it hasn't had. Look, California has more Latino politicians than any state in the union. It's also the worst place for Latinos to live by any economic and social metric. There's no definable working class agenda that all these Latinos are coming in and going, hey, let's figure this out and let's solve this for our community. No. They're the first ones to go to white progressive because that's where the donors are at and that's where the voters are at, and start saying, hey, no, we'll kind of front for you and front for all of these issues. And that's why I believe that this leakage that is happening, this rightward drift, is exactly for the reasons you articulated, is there's no tie there. And if it weren't for the Republicans being nativist, isolationist, protectionist, angry, mean, there would be a huge realignment that's going on. But like you, I don't think that the Republican Party will get its shit together in the next 30, 40 years. But I'm also not optimistic that the Democrats will either. And that's the premise of this book, is what we're seeing is the fastest growing segment of the electorate for economic and cultural reasons not being able to find a home in either party.
Fascinating.
And one of the other fascinating things, too, just not to keep going on this, but if you look at all these reform efforts, these third-party efforts or fix the Republican efforts, none of them have or engage Latino voters, which is where all the fish are. Like, go fishing where the fish are. This community's already, they're with you. They're with you, but you never see that, and it's just part of the dissonance between political elites, and I don't mean that in a bad way, just people who have the luxury of thinking about these things like you and I and your listeners do, and people who are on the ground that don't think about this. That's the dissonance. And our ability to engage and bring those voters into the system is going to say everything about the success of democracy going forward. Because, look, we talk a lot, Joe, about what the dangers to democracy, all of them legitimate. I spend most of my time thinking about them. But nobody's talking about the single largest ethnic demographic transformation in the country's entire history, which is going to have as much or greater impacts on the stability of that system.
That's what blows me away, Mike. Nobody's talking about this.
No one talks about it. And in many ways, it's the great hope.
I'm so glad you're writing
it could be the thing that cracks both, the heads of both of these crazy ass parties together and says, knock your shit off. Like, stop it already. Like, quit tearing down institutions. Quit going to these crazy ass extremes. That's not what we're looking for. And that if you look at most issues on polling, Latinos are right in the middle. And that's where the fight's going to be.
Trump tried to overthrow an election. January 6th, Trump tried to end our democracy. I believe this stuff in my bones. Does this resonate with Latino voters? Or
Yeah. I mean, not because of a historical legacy, or it's too often and too easy and frankly a little bit lazy to be like, where do these Latino white supremacists come from? Like, where's Enrique Tarrio and Nick Fuentes? And I mean, it's legitimate. These are legitimate questions. But rather than looking back to be like, oh, well, that comes from, the Cubans have been doing that for years, or the Mexicans, or strongmen, or caudillos, or whatever, the answer is much more simple than that, which is these are people that are trying to overcompensate to become white in America. That's what they're trying to do. They're trying to over-assimilate. They're trying to demonstrate that they belong here and build a community that rejects their past and moves them forward along that line. That's what's going on. So, when you see January 6th, I mean, there's nobody who's being engaged by that. I mean, there is that small bubble that has lied to itself and saying, no, it was just a protest that got out of control, right? We know those folks.
Yeah.
They're there. But the vast majority of people, Latinos overwhelmingly, are like, this is not good. It's not healthy. Now, what I will say is this. When whites look at what happened on January 6th, and when we talk about the end of the American experiment and the attacks on democracy, our entire perspective comes from a 250-year history here.
Yeah.
And learning from George Washington and the Revolutionary War and the struggles that we had all the way up. So we're aware of what that loss is.
Yep.
The whole idea of self-governance and Western notions of a republic and the idea of America, right? These are not, they're not that they're foreign, but they don't have the historical legacy or tie beyond 2 or 3 generations with most Hispanics.
That's a good point.
So we're not, when you and I see January 6th, it's like you're tearing at like all whole core.
Yeah.
I think with a lot of Hispanics, it's probably less intense. It's more just like, why the hell would you want to be tearing down this great government that I came here to work in? Like, what's wrong with you? Like, go to work, like, get a job, right? And so there, it's not as intense, but it's certainly not attracting anybody.
That's a really interesting perspective. Mike, a couple more, and then I'll let you be free. I find this conversation so damn interesting. You wrote a piece a few months ago. I don't remember where I read it, and I'm probably going to get it wrong, but about you were kudos to Gavin Newsom because he was engaging, I think, in the culture war fight that Republicans throw out there every freaking day, gender, race, all of this stuff.
Yeah.
Are these issues Democrats should engage in? But more importantly, when it comes to these culture war issues, where are Latinos on this?
Great question. So I think I wrote that piece for the Los Angeles Times. They called and asked. California Governor Gavin Newsom started this new PAC and this new program going to have Democrats start engaging in the culture wars.
Yeah.
The piece was less kudos and it was just kind of this observation. And the reason why it was important, and I wanted to draw it out, was it's really a very big inflection moment. Now, you and I, we were younger men in the 1992 campaign when Bill Clinton had the moniker, "It's the economy, stupid."
Yep.
And the whole Democratic Leadership Council, which he is a Southern governor from Arkansas, came to power, was like, the Democratic Party's cultural drift is killing us, right? The whole label San Francisco liberal, remember that was, it would just kill the Democratic Party because it showed the average, working folks that this is what the Democrats were prioritizing. It's not unlike today.
Yeah.
What Al Gore and Bill Clinton did was they brought it back to economics and moved that cultural drift back into the center. This is basically a 180 rejection of that. This is saying we're gonna embrace that entirely. We're gonna lean into that. And so I was like, this is really quite significant. Like, nobody's saying this because usually culture wars, we talked about this on the Lincoln Project a lot, culture wars are where the Democrats go to die. Yeah. Because the Republicans, we kick the shit out of them all the time. Yeah. And it's so easy, and they take the bait and they swallow the hook, and it's like, I can't believe they're going to fight us on this battle, right? But they do because they can't help themselves. Gavin is saying, he's making a case, and I think he's right. And that's what I was trying to say as a political professional. And here's why I think he's right. If you take the premise that 95% of voters aren't going to move either way, one way or the other, they're Republicans and they're Democrats, and you further take the argument that I said earlier, which is the only two groups that are moving are suburban college-educated white women and non-college-educated Hispanic men, these women are moving for cultural reasons. Yeah. So it actually does, for the first time, make sense, and Democrats can lean into these issues, and the Dobbs decision is the perfect example of that. And if you look at most of these districts, the congressional districts with the highest number of college-educated voters that are also represented by Republicans, I know that's in the weeds for folks, but let me put it really clearly, a handful of seats in Orange County, California, and a handful of seats in Long Island, New York. Exactly. Which are represented, these are blue states, these are Republicans representing marginal areas with a lot of college-educated people in them. Those are the voters where Republicans are like, I just can't, I'm not going to vote for George Santos. I'm a Republican, but my God, he drank the crazy sauce. Yeah. Like, I'm not going to do it. And I'm not one of those people, and I can't relate, and I'm not voting for him. I'm voting for the damn Democrats. That's what's been happening. And when Gavin Newsom goes and talks about lynching museums, and he goes in and talks about abortion in the pre-Roe era, and when he goes in and talks about the defense of Confederate statues that Ron DeSantis is putting up, white voters, college-educated people are like, that's not my party. That is not my party. And you know what? I guess I won't get the capital gains tax cut, and maybe I'll get a 14% return instead of an 18% return, but I'm not voting for crazy because that crazy is threatening the country, and this is just not who we are. And for the first time, I'll never forget, Stuart Stevens asked me in the last throes of the 2020 campaign. You know Stuart probably well. On the Lincoln Project, and we were having this fierce debate, as we do strategically in campaigns. And he was saying, Mike, okay, bottom line, do you want to do the closing arguments on culture or the economy? And I know he was fully expecting me to say the economy because that's the core vote that always brings Republicans back. And immediately I said, culture. The only movable group of the Republicans is women, and they're rejecting this shit that Trump is leaning into. College-educated women, and there's not there, and I don't mean Gavin Newsom and the Democrats are going to get 50% of them. You may get 33% of them, but you used to get 27, 29% of them. That 3-4% made the difference in Maricopa County, Arizona, and sent Kerry Lake packing. Yeah. They're the ones in Gwinnett, DeKalb County, around Atlanta that got Joe Biden elected. These are folks around the collared counties of Philadelphia and Pittsburgh that gave the margins to the Democrats to put that state back in the blue column. That's what I'm talking about. We get too hung up on this idea of this big major tectonic battles with 70 million voters voting this way or 70, like there's going to be these massive shifts. Brother, I will tell you what, we are going to spend $1 gazillion again in 2024. And this race, I don't care if it's Trump or DeSantis, I think very strongly it will be Trump, running against Biden is going to come down to less than 100,000 votes. It just is. I don't care if we spend no dollars or $100 gazillion. That's where we're at. So there's a lot of noise. There's a lot of people with blood pressure going up and their veins popping out of their necks and people freaking out about the issues. And do the Democrats have a communications and a message problem or this or this or that? The reality is if you move college-educated Republican women just slightly more to the Democrats, then U.S.-born Hispanic males go to the Republicans, the Democrats will win.
Okay, so Mike Madrid, that leads me to my second to last question. Which
are we going on too long? Is this longer than your normal show?
Man, Madrid, I could go on for another 2 hours.
All right.
So which of, in the short term, the next few cycles, which of those migrations is going to move faster? The white college-educated women to Republicans, or?
That's a great question, and here's the answer. It's not real clean. Most of the fast movement has already happened with college-educated white suburban women.
Yes.
It's just now happening, and it's happening faster with U.S.-born Hispanic males to the right. Here's the problem. For the moment, there are a lot more college-educated white women than there are U.S.-born Hispanic males. Okay?
Okay.
So in the short term, that's good news for the Democrats. You saw that in the 22 elections. You saw that in the 2020 election.
Okay.
You saw that in the 2018 election. Okay. So the last 3 elections, that's what's been happening. That's been the margin of victory. Okay. Now, at a certain point, the math is going to catch up.
Okay.
But it's probably not for a 6-8 year run, but that's where things are at.
That's it, Mike. That's a great answer. So in the short term, just on sheer numbers, the Democrats may be saved.
In raw numbers, the percentages, the question you asked was what shift is happening faster?
Yeah.
And the percentage, it's the Latino vote is one of the few that is moving that fast, but the numbers aren't as big as they are with college-educated white women in the right states and the right areas to move to the left.
Just a very cool, nuanced answer. I hope everybody understood what Mike Madrid just said. I'm going to close Mike Madrid with this. And by the way, thank you. Everybody, follow him on Twitter, @Madrid_Mike. So excited to get, and we'll push it and talk about it a lot next year, The Latinization of America, your book coming out next year. My final question, you've been in this business forever. You are a proud American, grown up working class. You've done well. You love this country to death. But don't bullshit me here. Are you bearish or bullish on the American experiment? And before you answer, and what I mean is, can this great thing, this country formed upon an idea, can it last? And I will only say this, Mike, as the dark Irishman I am, I typically answer the question. I'm a tad bearish, but where is Mike Madrid? Bearish or bullish on the American experiment?
I love the Irish for just that reason, too. As the people that have sustained the worst of the worst is the Irish. And they all talk about lament the end of coming, but they're the ones that are there, right? They're the base.
Exactly.
I am very optimistic, and I'm going to tell you why.
Tell me why.
It's probably not why you think it is. I am grateful not only for this moment happening in American history, but I am grateful to be living in it. And I learned this when I went to Ukraine last year.
Yeah.
I went to Ukraine about 45 days after the Russian broadened the invasion. They'd already invaded Crimea, but they attacked into the Donbass. And I went to Kyiv. And the reason I wanted to go to Kyiv is I wanted to see a people that were still committed to fighting and dying for freedom, because I'm not convinced that Americans will do that.
Oh.
And what I learned was, when I came back, was that we are going to be a better people because of the struggle. A nation's character can only be forged through fire. We have had the great luxury of living in the post-Cold War era, when America and the American experiment won what many people believed was the final victory, right? Francis Fukuyama called it the end of history. This is now the new world. We're going to be small d Democrats. There will be democracies. There will be freedom. America won. It beat back fascism. Through World War II, through the Cold War, America has come out the victor. What we found was that luxury became our downfall, that we got so complacent that we lost the whole concept and idea and the value of the institutions that provided that luxury. And I remember being in a hotel bar in downtown Kyiv, the only hotel open with air raid sirens going on. And the bartender, Ukrainian, of course, spoke very little English. I, of course, spoke no Ukrainian. And we're watching CNN International, and we're watching, remember these trucker caravans for freedom, right? Protesting gas prices and pissed about their freedom. And the bartender was like shocked. He was like, "Are you guys okay? Is America going to be okay?" And I was so embarrassed that is our notion of freedom compared to the fact that this guy's got 3 brothers who are out in the Donbass 100 kilometers away, probably dying or killing or being shot, and will be forever altered in this war, fighting for their country. But I realized at that moment that all of the struggles that we are going through are giving us back the opportunity to fight for our country. And the more scared you are, I want you to remember how frightened people were during the rise of Nazism and the collapse of the government when the South and the North went to war, and what it must have been like to take on King George. And all of these fights, all of these battles forged a nation. What we did not have was that fight. This is our fight, brother. And I ain't going to lose. I ain't going to lose to these guys. I'll tell you right now. And I know that there are brothers in arms like you who are fighting this fight. And I know that there are millions more of us than there are of them. I don't like it. But this is what is required for freedom to persist. This is how you build the character to give it to our children for the next nation. The next generation is to show them the value of what we have. You cannot give freedom to the next generation. You have to fight for it. And damn it, let's fight, brother. Let's fight. And that's why I'm optimistic.
Well, and I'll tell you this, Madrid. I asked that question to damn near every guest. Your answer has given me no bullshit. That's the most hopeful answer and the most cogent answer I've heard to that. To the point where this dark Irishman...
We're going to be better for it, man. Look, this ain't fun. This ain't easy. It's scary as shit. But you walk into the battle, and you when you hear the drums call, you march, and you fight for your values, and we're going to win. We're not going to lose to these guys, okay? We're not. Agreed. It doesn't mean that we're okay. It doesn't mean that we're healthy, but it means we're going to have to fight. And fighting forges a nation's character, and we're blessed to have that opportunity. There's one other quick thing I want to mention.
Yeah.
And I hear you talk about this, and I love you for it. You lament the fact sometimes that you were swimming in the swamp of the Tea Party and all of that stuff that has kind of metastasized. I'm a huge believer in contrition. You're one of the few people who says, I'm sorry for those times and is spending their life making up for that, but I also don't want you to overdo it. Okay. You're a good guy. You're a good man. You're doing the right things. This is what we call in Catholicism an act of contrition, but you don't need to carry that cross too much further, man. You're doing the right thing. You got to remember that, right? Don't do it out of obligation. It's probably the Irish in you, but what you need to do is you need to keep moving forward and keep doing the right thing, because I'm proud of you.
I feel like you and my wife, I feel like it's my penance for the rest of my life.
You're Irish. That's what you do.
Irish. Mike Madrid, everybody. Michael, thank you, my friend.
Great talking to you, Joe.
Thank you for listening. Remember to listen, share, and follow White Flag with Joe Walsh on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and everywhere great podcasts are found. And be sure to leave a 5-star review. This has been White Flag with Joe Walsh.